We are coming on the air with breaking news. The latest on the investigation into the Bourbon Street attack. The FBI saying the attacker acted alone. Many questions, though, still remain. The Sugar Bowl underway right now. Bourbon Street back open. We're going to take you there in just a minute. We're also getting late details on the man who blew up the cybertruck in Vegas. The FBI saying he also acted alone, but they still don't know why he did it. We're live on the ground there. Both men, they did use the app Turo to get the cars used in the attacks. The company's saying they're working with law enforcement. So what exactly is Turo and what clues can that app provide? And the latest moves in the high-stakes PR battle playing out very publicly between Blake Lively and her co-star Justin Baldoni. The dueling lawsuits the stars are filing. And in tonight's original, the Americans deciding to say goodbye to the U.S. What's behind their motivation to pull up roots? That's later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin in for Hallie tonight. And right now, two active investigations into New Year's Day's attacks, with President Biden just saying tonight that the FBI tells him, as of now, they have no information that anyone else is involved in the deadly attacks in New Orleans. That's as there had been all these questions about whether there is any connection between that attack and the cybertruck explosion outside of Trump International Hotel. No indication that that's the case, but police in Vegas say there are some similarities. You're taking a live look at the Superdome in New Orleans, the Sugar Bowl happening there right now after it was postponed yesterday. Security there said to be similar to the level used for the Super Bowl. Our team inside the Superdome capturing this video during a moment of silence for the victims before the kickoff. And Bourbon Street, where the attack happened, back open as well after crews cleaned up the gruesome scene there early this morning. The identities of some of those 14 victims who were killed slowly coming in now. You see their faces here. They include parents of young kids, a student who had just finished his first semester at the University of Alabama, and a member of the New Orleans Saints and Pelicans video production teams. There are still several other victims who we're waiting to learn more about, and at least 35 others who were hurt in the attack. One of those survivors telling our Tom Yamas he's surprised he's still alive.
There was this people screaming, and I was laying on the ground, and I saw all my wheelchair parts on the ground beside me. I can't believe what happened.
In Las Vegas, police painting a detailed picture of the moves of this cybertruck that exploded just outside Trump International Hotel the same day as the attack in New Orleans. 7 people got hurt in the explosion in Vegas, and the person inside the car died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. That person rented the cybertruck, according to the sheriff. Matthew Livelsberger, an active-duty special ops soldier. Dave Noriega is following developments for this on the cybertruck explosion. George Solis is in New Orleans, though. I want to start with Tom Winter with the latest on the investigation. Let's talk first, Tom, as we're hearing some of these kind of similarities, what they're sharing between both the Vegas truck and the attack in New Orleans. Talk me through what we know here and how they're still investigating a possible but not definitive here connection.
Yeah, I would say that right now there's just some evidence that is coincidental between the two, and they haven't been able to make any sort of possible connection. One of the things that I think they're looking at here, Yasmin, is the idea that these individuals both served in the Army. They're looking at the fact that both of them served in some of the same places, but it's not clear that they served in the same places at the same time. So I think that's important to mention. There is, of course, the idea that they both used the same type of application or the same type of service to be able to rent the cars that they used. So that's something they're obviously focused on, and the fact that they occurred within hours of each other. But putting that together, that doesn't form a definitive link. But they're not ruling anything out either, given the similarities between the two. So that's the first thing. As far as new information, we do have some new details as you're looking at some of the commonality between the two. It should be noted that the explosives, and this is the new information that we have, are not the same between both incidents. I want to speak specifically to New Orleans. What the FBI apparently found, according to 2 senior law enforcement officials, to myself and my colleague Julia Ainsley, is that there were functional explosives contained inside coolers. And inside those coolers, it was taped up inside the coolers. There was galvanized pipe with end caps on them and some sort of a receiver to receive a remote detonation. There were also nails coated inside of those galvanized pipes. That's something that is nearly straight out of terrorist propaganda, both from al-Qaeda as well as ISIS. So that's something to keep in mind. That's new information about New Orleans, at least.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because when I read your note on that, I specifically thought about the Boston Marathon bombing, Tom, right? Because I believe there were similar devices that were used during the Boston Marathon bombing, as it's being reported to be these IED devices that were placed on Bourbon Street, yeah?
So I've actually held in my hands the replicas that the FBI put together of the bombs that the Boston Marathon bombers used, the pressure cooker bombs,
right,
but also seen the items of evidence from Watertown and from the Watertown Police Department, from the engagement with the Watertown Police Department, I should say, between the two Boston bombers that occurred several days after that incident. It is the exact same thing. Again, galvanized pipe, galvanized end caps. The idea is to build the pressure inside of them. Comes right out of the terrorist.
Do we know why it is that the attacker had not been able to detonate these IEDs?
Right. So that's the big question. You know, did he try? Did he not try? What was the purpose of them? Were they trying to distract law enforcement? Did he want them to go off ahead of time? Did he want them to go off once he had continued his run down Bourbon Street? All big questions. Difficult to figure that out. Did they malfunction as well, as another possibility? That's information that's still under investigation.
Do they have video showing the attacker placing these IEDs?
They sure do. Yeah, it's within several hours of it, starting at 1:46 in the morning, according to the FBI in their briefing today. Deputy Assistant Director for Counterterrorism, Stephen Rea, talking about that. They actually have him planning them there. And that's another one of the big reasons why they believe he acted alone.
I just got one more question for you. I know you're toggling these two stories, so we're going back and forth here on this. But I have a question about the motive in Vegas and where they are with that, if they're still investigating this as a possible terrorist event.
Still investigating as a possible terrorist event, but there's no immediate indication of a specific motive. They do not believe he's been in touch with any foreign terrorist organizations.
Got it. Tom Winter, thank you.
You got
Appreciate it. All right, let's go back to New Orleans, Bourbon Street. That's where we find George Solis. I mean, we see it behind you, right, George? Just yesterday, the area in which you were was littered with bodies. That was the reality of what took place. And now, Bourbon Street back open. Take us there. What's the mood? What's going on?
Yeah, you might be able to hear the music is starting to get really loud. You see a number of people coming down Bourbon Street, still a shell of what it would be on any other given day, given what happened here just days ago. But nevertheless, this community feels like it is their responsibility to come back out here and try to get back to a sense of normalcy, as weird as that sounds. And again, as you look behind me, again, this street is slowly starting to fill up, and you can expect more people to begin filtering after the Sugar Bowl ends here. A lot of these places are prepared for that capacity, but safety is, of course, paramount here. We heard earlier today from Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick about hardening this target, making it a lot harder to access. You have a heavy police presence out here to access Bourbon Street right now. There is a large truck there that's in front. You also have what's known as arches on the sidewalks. They are leaving nothing to chance here. And again, we heard from the superintendent a little earlier, just before they opened the street here. They held a private ceremony. You had a second string band, a brass band, come down here to honor the victims, to honor those that lost their lives before anyone was allowed to step foot onto the street. Here's what she said earlier.
This is not a matter of pointing blame anywhere. A terrorist is hell-bent on destruction. This man was going to do his best. And if it hadn't been on Bourbon, he was going to go somewhere else.
Yasmin, just really quickly, just touching on some of the environment and the mood here. Earlier, Louisiana native New Orleans rapper Master P was here, also talking about honoring the victims and making sure that this community begins to heal and giving back as they try to begin to move forward here.
Just quickly, George, because we don't have a lot of time, I know they've stepped up security significantly when it comes to the Sugar Bowl, essentially making security the way it is supposed to be for the Super Bowl. What did that look like?
Yeah, it is a very hard place to access. We've seen a lot of police out there. You know, there's a lot more barricades out there. The governor calling it one of the safest places in the country. Yasmin.
All right, George Solis for us. Thank you. Again, we're toggling these two major stories that are quickly developing throughout the day. Want to go now to David Noriega, who's standing by for us on that cybertruck explosion at the Trump Hotel in Vegas. David, thanks for joining us on this. Tom Winter and I were talking through some of the details of this, but we've learned a lot today about the U.S. Army soldier at the center of this case, what officials are saying about how he actually got to this hotel and then how he potentially died. Walk us through some of the details that we learned in just the last couple of hours.
Yeah, so the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department had a press conference where we learned, as you know, the most information that we've gotten on this incident so far. And they did detail that he rented this Cybertruck through Turo in Denver, Colorado on December 28th and then drove it from the Denver area to Las Vegas. They were able to, because these trucks log information from every stop, from everywhere that they stop to charge, they were able to, you can see the map on your screen there, they were able to pinpoint exactly all of the stops that he made to charge the truck. He stopped in several places in New Mexico and Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona before getting to Las Vegas. You know, we also have been learning some pretty interesting details about this individual himself. Matthew Allen Leibelsberger, as you pointed out, he's an Army soldier, a special operations Army soldier, highly decorated. An Army spokesperson told NBC News that he received more than 30 medals, awards, decorations, including 4 Bronze Star medals, 1 Bronze Star medal with valor, meaning he obtained that for heroic acts in combat. The big question, really the big pending question, is on motive. There is no clear answer on that, but there are some clues, specifically around the fact that, you know, the authorities said in the press conference today that they believe he would have been, given his Army experience, capable of building explosives more effective than the ones that he built. So it's unclear whether his intention was to hurt people or whether his intention really was to die by suicide, which they indicated that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound and then blow up the car in some kind of symbolic act. That is, those are exactly the kinds of questions that investigators are now looking into. Yasmin?
We also saw some new video showing really the clearest look that we've seen so far of the trunk of that Cybertruck, where officials are saying they found inside the car. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so what they found inside the car were a number of explosive materials, but they're all sort of consumer-grade explosive materials, like fireworks. They mentioned, for example, explosive targets that you can buy at a sporting goods store. Right. So nothing, again, particularly sophisticated. Even the fireworks were consumer-grade fireworks, not commercial-grade fireworks. And we are talking about a person with a decades-long, highly decorated special operations military career who almost certainly had working knowledge of explosives, and if his intention had been to build a very damaging bomb, could have done so. Again, you know, he also had two firearms in the car, which he had legally purchased a few days prior on December 30th. It was one of those firearms that he used, according to authorities, to shoot himself in the head before that explosion took place.
Anything we've learned here, David, when it comes, as I was talking to Tom Winter about motive, right, still potentially being investigated as a terrorist act, but from his social media, his intention, his objective here?
Look, that is, again, the big pending question. As Tom told you earlier, there is no indication so far that he was in contact with or inspired by any, you know, international terrorist organizations. The fact that he was driving a Cybertruck, the fact that this happened directly outside of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, authorities are being very clear about the fact that this was intentional, right? There are sort of indications that there was some sort of ideological motivation behind this, but it is too early in the investigation to say exactly what that motivation was, Yasmin.
All right, David Noriega, thank you for being on this for us. Appreciate it. We are going to turn now back to New Orleans, where we're learning new details about the Bourbon Street attacker, including that he abandoned a plan to kill members of his own family in favor of the attack in New Orleans.
In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers.
I want to get to Kathy Park, who's in Houston for us, where the attacker is from. I know that you've been around that home that we believe belonged to the attacker. What have you learned, Kathy, about his personal life, and what have you seen in terms of police activity?
Yasmin, good evening. So I can tell you that the neighborhood where the suspect live is relatively quiet. It's been like this all day. You might see a crowd behind me, some cars passing through, but that's pretty much all media. So this time yesterday, this area here in Houston, the 12,000 block of Crescent Peak Drive was surrounded by law enforcement. Both local and federal authorities were in this area, blocked off the entrance to the public as well as to media. This is actually the closest that we have been getting to this neighborhood. And the FBI said that they were given the all clear. They gave us the all clear around 7:50 a.m. local time, saying that they searched the area, cleared the area, and said that there was no longer a threat to residents who live here. We also know, according to the FBI, that they made no arrests. They did not reveal if they were able to comb through this area and actually pull out any evidence. That's still a big question at this time. But Yasmin, I do want to point out that earlier today I had a chance to speak with a neighbor who lived next to the suspect. I asked him, what did you know about him? What was he like? And he said he was pretty quiet. He moved to this community here in Houston about a year and a half ago, kept to himself for the most part, and they didn't have many interactions except on New Year's Eve. He said he saw him with that white pickup truck in the area. He was packing it up with some light items, and he told this neighbor who he spoke with that he was headed off to Louisiana and he was set to begin a new job as an IT specialist. So those are some details that we were able to uncover. Also, NBC News was able to uncover some public records showing that he was divorced twice, and the second wife filed for a temporary restraining order back in 2020. These records also peel back the layers on his financial troubles as well. It appeared he was kind of in some financial turmoil when those divorce proceedings got underway in 2020. Also, when he formed a business as well, looked like he was tens of thousands of dollars in debt based on the information that we've been able to pull up. Yasmin.
Yeah, still really piecing a lot of things together. Kathy Park, thank you for being there for us. Appreciate it. Want to go now to NBC's Courtney Cubie, who sat in pie for us over at the Pentagon. And again, it's kind of this confluence of so many things that are happening, especially when it comes to the military record court, right, of both the attacker in New Orleans and the individual in Vegas as well. Let's talk New Orleans, if we can, for a moment first, and the military record. Walk us through his time, how much time he spent in the military, his discharge, where he was, anything we know, Court.
Yeah, so he spent the majority of his time working on the administrative side in the Army. Now, initially, he tried to enlist in the Navy. He spent about a month in the delayed deployment program, essentially. He never actually shipped. He never actually began any training, so he never really served in the Navy. Well, fast forward 2006, he enlisted in the Army. He shipped in 2007, and he served on active duty for the next several years. Yasmin, that included one deployment to Afghanistan in 2009, where, again, he was serving in a primarily administrative role, an admin clerk working in human resources, even at times working in IT, as we just heard from Kathy, what he went on to do in his civilian world. He spent several years on active duty before transferring to the Army Reserves and then ultimately leaving the military. He was discharged honorably in 2020 as a staff sergeant. Yes, as you know, that's a relatively senior, mid-level to senior non-commissioned officer in the U.S. Army. So, and according to what we have from his service record, he has a number of unit awards and medals, a couple of individual, primarily unit awards and medals. But when I look at his service record, after looking at a lot of service records over the years, I would say there's nothing that really stands out about his service. It seems like for the most part, he served honorably according to his record. But again, primarily in a more administrative role, yes.
And then there is kind of this odd crossover, possibly a connection, possibly a coincidence when it comes to their military record, and more specifically where they served at Fort Bragg, right? What do we know about that? The timing of this? Do we have any indication they'd ever spoken to each other, that they knew each other? I mean, we know this is obviously a huge facility. A lot of folks that are serving in the military are in and out often. What do we know there?
Yeah, and especially when you're talking about Leibelsberger, the soldier who was who we believe was killed in the explosion in the cybertruck in Las Vegas. He was a special forces soldier throughout his entire career. There is virtually no way he served in special forces and was not assigned to Fort Bragg, now known as Fort Liberty, throughout his time, especially because he was in for almost 20 years. So it is possible that they would have overlapped while they were at Fort Bragg, or now Fort Liberty. But it's an enormous installation. There are tens of thousands of people who work there. And the chances, because they had such different jobs in the Army, the chances that they really overlapped in any meaningful way is pretty unusual, unless it was in, frankly, more of a social role.
Yeah.
They also both served in Afghanistan. But again, a big country. During some of the times of those deployments, you know, it wasn't the tail end of the war in Afghanistan, 2009. There were upwards of 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan at that time. The chances that they overlapped or knew each other are relatively slim. Not impossible, but relatively slim, Yasmin.
I know you're staying on this for us. Courtney Cubey, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, let's talk about the people that matter most right now, and that is the victims. The victims of yesterday's deadly attack. 27-year-old Martin Vesh Jr., nicknamed Tiger. Vesh is from Lafayette, Louisiana, graduated from Princeton University, where he played on the football team. Tiger had been living in New York City, working on Wall Street. He was on Bourbon Street with a friend when the attack happened. I want to bring in Tiger's father, Martin Vesh, and Jack Vesh, Tiger's brother, as well. Welcome to you both. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't imagine what you are going through a day after losing your brother and your son. Martin, how are you doing?
Good evening. Thanks for having us. Well, as you can imagine, when you lose your oldest son, it's very difficult. But with Jack and his sisters and my wife and, you know, all of our extended family that are here with us, we had a vigil earlier where probably 500 people showed up from St. Thomas More, Tigers and Jacks and our kids' high school. So we have a lot of support, and it's making it a little bit easier for us for sure.
Jack, what was your big bro Tiger like?
No, he was awesome. He was my best friend. I would say if you ask anybody who his best friend was, so many people would stand up. He was charismatic, outgoing, loving. You know, he lived life to the fullest. He lived 80 years in a 27-year span. He's our inspiration, our role model. You know, he's shaped all of our lives, and, you know, we're the way we are because of him. And we just couldn't be more thankful of him and everything he's done. And now we have an angel that's always going to be with us. And the first thing I told my family whenever we heard the news was that, you know, my whole family is kind of scattered around the States, but not only seeing him a couple of times a year, now he'll be with us in every moment until the end of time. And when we sleep, when we eat, when we're working, future endeavors, whatever it may be, man, he was the best. I just love him so much, and I wish I could call him and tell him that.
I'm sure he's listening to you now. Martin, did you see your son over Christmas? Did you spend the holidays together? What was the last thing that you said to him before he left?
Yeah, no, he came in probably a week before Christmas, and we had a wonderful Christmas with the family. And his roommate and dear best friend, who was also a victim in this tragedy, in this crime, wanted to go to New Orleans. He'd never been. And so Tiger, my wife and I took Tiger and him to dinner on New Year's Eve. And, you know, I hugged him and told him I love him. And he hugged me back and said, "I love you, Dad." So that was the last words that, you know, that I spoke to him.
So you took him to dinner just hours before he lost his life. How did you find out that your son was a victim of the attack on Bourbon Street, Martin?
So fortunately, his roommate and his best friend was conscious enough to call his mom and tell his mom that they had been involved in a terrible accident, although he didn't realize at the time the magnitude of what had happened. And We hadn't heard from Tiger, though. And so we were, getting calls at 6 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Eve. And, they weren't able to find Tiger. And so it was a mad dash for me and my wife and our family to get to New Orleans. And on the route to New Orleans, we found him, located him because he was brought to the hospital unconscious, and were able to get to the hospital. And the job that the team at Auctioner Hospital did was, I've never seen that before. It was stupendous. They did everything they could do to save him. They worked on him with a team of not less than 20 people. It was extraordinary.
Jack, what do you want folks watching to know about what happened in New Orleans and what this attacker took from you?
Yeah. I think you just have to learn to forgive. Forgiving and forgetting are two completely different things. This man had evil in his eyes. He was going to commit this act, whether if it was by a car, bombs, if he was going to get out of his car with an AR, whatever it may be. So I don't know. It's super hard. Like I said, you just have to be able to forgive. That's what God says is the most important thing. And I just want to tell everybody, out there, family disputes, if you have them, if there are people, your people around you that you love, give them a hug and kiss them. Life is so precious and it could be gone so quick. And I think that my family right now is truly realizing what that means. Like I said, my brother was all of our best friends. And it's definitely going to be a hard, long life without him. But the Lord will get us all through this. And like I said, if you have loved ones at home, or if you haven't called your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, grandparents, if you haven't told them you love them, and pick up that phone and call them and tell them that.
Martin, how do you pick up the pieces? How do you go on without your oldest?
Yeah, day by day, one day at a time. And thankfully, I've got a couple of friends who have unfortunately suffered the same fate with, losing a child. But the support of Jack and his two sisters and my wife and all of our extended family, many of whom are standing around the room watching us right now. And, it's there's no other way. There's no other way that you can do it. And we all have, thankfully, a very strong faith. Being from South Louisiana, that's one thing that, most of us were blessed with. And so strong faith and family, and the support that we have from so many people. That's the only way we'll be able to move on. Yeah.
I got to tell you, the courage that it takes for the two of you to be vulnerable the way that you just were with me, and trusting me with the story of your son and your brother, and just speaking with us today, a mere 24 hours after losing him, is unfathomable. And I thank you. And of course, my heart and my prayers are with you in this unimaginable time. Thank you to you both. And we'll be speaking and thinking of Tiger certainly in the days and months to come. Thank you, guys.
And I would just like to say one more thing, about all the other victims of this event and all their families. This happened to so many people. And I just want to make sure that we all, remember and pray for all those people as well. Just everybody who got hurt in this tragic incident and have died. Yes, all these victims right here. Thank you.
All those faces
thank you
that have lost lives. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about Tiger and Ryan and all the other victims. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Be well. We'll be right back. All right, another pet food brand contaminated with bird flu. What else public health leaders are warning people and pets not to eat? Up first, though, tonight, major developments in the growing legal battle between Hollywood stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, with 2 new lawsuits filed on New Year's Eve. Baldoni now suing the New York Times for libel over its reporting on Lively's allegations against him. He says the article is, quote, rife with inaccuracies, misrepresentations, and omissions that relied on Lively's, quote, self-serving narrative. The Times saying it's going to vigorously defend against the suit. And what's more, Lively is also out with a new federal lawsuit against Baldoni and the production company involved in their movie. It ends with us. A lot going on here. Baldoni's attorney did not immediately respond to a request for comment on this lawsuit. Remember, this is coming after her initial complaint alleging sexually inappropriate behavior on set and a coordinated effort to smear her. Baldoni's team has called these allegations, quote, completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious. Chloe Molas is joining us now with more on this. I mean, all of this has been going on really for the last couple of weeks or so, and I think a lot of folks are a little confused as to the back and forth, right? The really kind of nuts and bolts of what each party is saying. Walk us through that.
Okay, so there were two lawsuits, both filed on New Year's Eve. And I think that's why people feel like they're getting so much information all at once, because originally Blake Lively had filed a civil rights complaint in the state of California, alleging harassment on set, that it was in a very toxic workplace for her. Well, now she's suing Justin Baldoni for all those accusations that she made over a week ago. But Justin Baldoni is now suing the New York Times for $250 million, accusing them of libel. As you know, the burden of proof is very high to go after a news organization for something like defamation. So what he is pointing to are text messages that he says were taken out of context purposefully, that text messages that had nuance and emojis, they weren't actually laid out the way that they should have been, and that even emojis were taken out. Now, Blake Lively's team has come out and said that nothing in Justin Baldoni's new lawsuit affects what they are planning to do. Now, I think the big question is, are we going to see them face off in a courtroom at some point? And it sounds like this is only heating up more, with Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, coming out saying that he's going to be filing more lawsuits and providing more text messages and proof.
So I know that Lively wasn't, as you just talked about as well, mentioned in the libel suit that Baldoni filed against the New York Times, but there has also kind of been a lot of fallout for Baldoni from all of this.
He's been dropped by William Morris Endeavor, his big Hollywood agency. The co-host of his podcast just quit. And he's also lost a recent award that was given to him by an organization that was actually championing him for his support of women. I mean, this movie was about women and domestic violence and giving people without a voice a voice. And now he's being accused of all sorts of harassment for allegedly showing Blake Lively pornography on set and talking, or his producer did, and that he was talking in an explicit way, and that they even had to have a meeting, according to Blake Lively's lawsuit, with Ryan Reynolds, her husband, Justin Baldoni, the production company, and herself, to lay out points in order for her to return to the set. So again, you can imagine that through discovery and motions, and as this potentially gets to trial, which it will take a while, as you know, I mean, we cover these sorts of things all the time, it could get uglier.
So there's been a lot of stones thrown. What does this mean going forward? Like, what is going to happen? What is that timeline?
Well, there's a lot of interest, but I think that what you're going to see is that potentially sometime in the next year, you might see this face off in a courtroom. But do Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni really want that to happen? Maybe Justin Baldoni at this point. But does Blake Lively really want to? Will we see cameras in there like a Johnny Depp Amber Heard 2.0? I mean, that is where this likely might head. But also it sounds like Baldoni's side has a lot more lawsuits, and you might see them now sue Blake Lively.
Well, we know what he's seeking, but what is she seeking?
Well, right now, I mean, she's seeking unspecified damages.
Okay.
And so the thing is now that she has finally, waved that flag and sued him, you can imagine he's going to countersue. And I think what's interesting is what sorts of text messages, what is he going to show and produce? Because he says that things were taken out of context by the Times, and emojis were removed, and nuance and context, that if the American public had the trove of text messages, that they would have a much different opinion. So again, I think this is only going to get more complicated, messier. And are these two really going to go down this path? Because it's going to put them both in a more vulnerable light.
Especially when you have these huge Hollywood superstars.
And families and all.
Yeah. Speaking of families, we have a studio audience in play right now. We got your two little boys, right?
Yes.
Leo and Luke. Alex and Aviva, they're best friends as well, and your whole family behind them as well. Your friends, your husband. I mean, you can't get better than that, right? Watching mommy on TV. Can you guys say hi?
They love NBC. They love watching Mommy, and they're on holiday break right now.
That's awesome.
They love Hallie Jackson.
And they're coming to look at the tree, right, outside 30 Rock?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
They also want to see SNL. I said maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, now is the time.
Yeah. I
Because
can't
they're not
even
in
get
session.
tickets, but I'll take you to set.
Yeah. Well, thank you for staying on this for us. Appreciate it, Chloe.
Thank you.
All right. Want to get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, at least 10 people are hurt after a shooting outside a nightclub in Queens, New York last night. Authorities believe there were 3 to 4 gunmen and are investigating whether the shooting is gang-related. All the victims are expected to be okay. Police still investigating. No arrests, though, so far. At number 2, President Biden awarding dozens of people with the Presidential Citizens Medal today, including former Congresswoman Liz Cheney and Democrat Benny Thompson, to the leaders behind the congressional investigation into the January 6th Capitol riot as well. The move coming after threats from President-elect Trump to punish former members of the committee. At number 3, health officials in L.A. warning people to avoid raw milk and raw meat products and not to feed them to their pets after the bird flu virus was found in a second brand of raw pet food. Remember, last week a cat in Oregon got sick after eating a raw food product contaminated with the virus. Now, officials saying at least 1 cat has tested positive for bird flu in California and that 4 other animals living in the same house are likely sick as well. The brand Monarch Raw Pet Food is usually sold at farmers markets in the state. The company has not responded to our request for comment. Number 4, Apple now putting warnings on AirTags to prevent children from consuming the batteries in them. It comes after consumer product safety officials accused the company of violating a safety requirement. Apple's also adding warnings on the Find My app when changing out the batteries for them. And number 5, the first meteor shower of the year should light up the sky over the next couple of days. Experts say this might be one of the strongest ones of the year. This shower caused by debris from a nearby asteroid. And it could last, by the way, up to 6 hours. All right, coming up, the growing criticism over the car rental service used in both New Orleans and Las Vegas. What is Turo? And how is the company responding? The shocking rescue in Colorado as well after a teenager ended up falling dozens of feet down a missile silo. How a search team pulled him out. I'll be right back.
Well, hi there, Yasmin. As you mentioned, the president spent the day returning from Camp David, going to the White House, also being briefed by some of his top officials over at the FBI and Homeland Security. The vice president also taking part in that meeting, we believe virtually. And there you're looking at live pictures of the Presidential Citizens Medal that he's presenting. He's also presenting, perhaps controversially to some conservatives, that medal to former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, as well as Congressman Benny Thompson, the chairs of the January 6th committee. Again, that ceremony happening right now at the White House. But earlier today, President Biden spoke about the investigation into those 2 incidents in New Orleans and in Las Vegas. He said that according to the latest information he has, that both incidents do not appear to be connected at this point, but the investigation is ongoing. And the president also said, reiterating what FBI authorities had said earlier in the day, that it appears that the New Orleans attacker acted alone at this point. Yasmin.
I want to talk about President-elect Trump as well, because we saw the social media post from the president-elect yesterday, essentially blaming the Biden administration's border policies for the deadly attack in New Orleans, saying it's people coming from across the border. We now know the attacker in New Orleans was a U.S.-born citizen living in Texas who actually served this country in the military. Have we gotten any sort of correction from President-elect Donald Trump since that social media post?
No, we haven't, Yasmin, and that's not something we usually hear from the president-elect. Look, this is the timeline of kind of how that all went down. Yesterday, in the early stages of this investigation, there was a report that the truck used in that attack may have been seen near Eagle Pass, Texas, near the U.S.-Mexico border, and so that was used by President-elect Trump and his allies to perhaps suggest that this attacker may have crossed the border, may have been a migrant. Again, as you said, that is false because the FBI has said that he was a U.S. citizen. But as of now, we have not heard the president-elect address that directly. He spent today and much of yesterday at his international golf course here in Palm Beach County. And the president-elect and his allies have really tweak their message, so to speak, not just blaming and criticizing the Biden administration over its border policies, but also picking up and highlighting the attacker in New Orleans and his suspected ties to ISIS, him having the black flag on that truck, for example. So this is something that we expect to hear more of from the president-elect, but notably, he has not been seen on camera addressing reporters or addressing anyone ever since he spoke briefly to reporters late on New Year's Eve here at his Mar-a-Lago estate, Yasmin.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez for us. Thank you, Gabe. Appreciate it. So NBC covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it's tough to read, to watch, to listen to all of them, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment that we call The Local. We're going to start in our Western Bureau. At least 3 people are dead, dozens hurt after a fireworks explosion in Honolulu. You can see just how blinding these fireworks were, erupting all at the same time, basically. Police there say it started after someone lit up multiple firework cartridges, which fell to the side and then set off another set of pyrotechnics. Out of our Northeast Bureau, the FBI searching the home of a former top official with the NYPD today. Jeffrey Madry resigned last month after he was accused of demanding sex from a subordinate for extra pay. Madry is denying the allegations, claiming the two had a consensual relationship. Authorities still investigating. Over to our Western Bureau. Fire crews rescuing a teenager stuck in an abandoned missile silo in Colorado. Look at this. Rescue teams. They said the team fell 30 feet down into water at the very bottom of that silo. Crews had to use a rope system to get him out. He is expected, though, to be okay. All right, coming up, the string of attacks on New York City subways that have riders spooked. The city's new plans to make its vital transportation system more safe and secure. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. There is growing alarm tonight after a string of gruesome, high-profile attacks in the New York City subway in recent weeks, including 2 men stabbed less than 20 minutes apart in unrelated attacks at Manhattan subway station yesterday. And a warning about this next video because it is disturbing. It shows a man on the afternoon on New Year's Eve getting violently pushed in front of an oncoming subway. He is expected to survive. My gosh. That is terrifying to see. And remember, there was that horrific incident where a sleeping rider was set on fire just 10 days ago as well. All of these, despite government promises of crackdowns and more National Guard and police deployed to subway stations. I want to bring in Sam Brock to talk more about this. All of this happening in the span of really 3 weeks over the holiday season. I mean, that video is terrifying. All of us have stood in that very position, looking at our cell phone, waiting for the subway to come. That could happen to anybody, right? What are they saying about these incidents and how they're going to step up security?
What you just showed, those examples are chilling and demonic, frankly. And I think that when you talk to people from the city, when you talk to the state governor's office, the MTA, they will say, this has been a rough last couple of weeks. But that, Yasmin, is not necessarily representative of what's going on big picture. They'll say, go back to March when we had this big 5-point plan. That's when Governor Hochul unveiled that. 1,000+ New York State police, National Guardsmen, MTA police on the ground. Thousands of cameras added. There is a proposal to get a law passed where judges would ban people who have committed assault or been convicted of assault from accessing the transit system. They say since that point in time, crime has dropped about 10% system-wide, and since January of 2021, it's dropped 42%. That's one side of the equation. The other one is talk to riders about what they're seeing right now. And they'll tell you that this is the most harrowing sequence of events that they have ever experienced. You mentioned it a second ago. A woman was literally lit on fire on a train in Brooklyn only a few weeks ago. Yesterday, there were 2 stabbings. One person was just literally standing on a platform and ended up getting stabbed by a sharp object. People are seeing the accumulation of this, and they are getting concerned. I did try to get a snapshot of people, regular riders, to find out how are you processing all this? What's your mentality about taking the subway? Here's a sample of what we heard.
I feel safe. It's just a way of life. You know, if you're down in the city all the time, you know, you expect these things. It's gotten worse every year, and just the latest things that have been happening. If I didn't need to take the subway, I wouldn't.
So many times I've been threatened with my child on the subway, literally with a knife. So it's literally every day it's a lottery for me and my child.
She described it as a lottery, didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. The last point I would leave you with on this is that the city of Los Angeles has a population of 4.5 million people. The MTA chair said, imagine, that's how many people ride our subways every single day. Would they take 5 to 6 crimes a day, the city of Los Angeles as a whole? Yes. We don't want to see any sort of violent crimes going on in our subways, but that's sort of the comparison there.
But here's the thing. It's a necessity in the city. I take the subway 2, 3, 4 times every single day. I noticed actually a few months ago at my subway stop that there were barricades put in place along the subway platform. So we could actually stand behind those barricades, right? And then I noticed that where I switched, there were no barricades. So what is the plan to institute more of those kind of barricades so folks feel safer, that they won't necessarily get pushed onto the tracks?
There could be access issues on that when you consider about people who have disabilities or just really the sheer volume of people trying to get on and off of trains. But I will say this, there are definitely more police now, at least they say, officials, local, state, than there were previously, more cameras. And then there are calls now to improve the mental health services available in the city, because no one will sort of address this directly, but they will sort of hint around the fact that you have a confluence of homelessness, mental illness, and new laws that were passed only several years ago that make it easier to be out on the streets, even if you've committed a crime. And perhaps all of these are coming into one crescendo, leading to the situation that we have right now.
Did anybody you talked to say they're going to stop taking the subway?
No, no one said they would not.
Yeah, because you have to. You have to keep using
like
it.
you said.
Yeah, Sam Brock, thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Appreciate it. I'll be right back. Growing scrutiny tonight over the online car rental service used in both the New Orleans truck attack and the Las Vegas Tesla explosion. We're talking about Turo. It's known as a sort of Airbnb for cars, created back in 2009. Individual owners, or hosts, by the way, they can post their vehicles to Turo's website, or people can rent them, making payments through the platform. In a federal filing, the company is saying it has 150,000 active hosts around the world, 350,000 vehicle listings, and 3.5 million active guests. There are questions and concerns about security on the platform, as cars have been stolen and used for nefarious and/or criminal purposes. I want to bring in Ryan Riley to talk more about this. So the commonality of the fact, Ryan, right, that Turo is used both in Vegas along with New Orleans, it's a head scratcher, and it might just be a coincidence. What are we learning and hearing from Turo?
Yeah, so they put out a statement on this on the matter. You know, obviously this is a platform that is sort of like you mentioned, like the Airbnb, and you know it kind of makes sense because these are the most valuable assets that a lot of people own, and most of the time they're just sitting in a driveway or sitting in public space on a road, not doing much, not earning any money back, and that's why people end up renting out their cars. What Turo has said is, you know, we do not believe that either renter has a criminal background that would have identified them as a security threat. We are devastated by these horrible incidents and remain dedicated to helping the authorities however we can. There's not a belief that obviously the individuals who rented this out, and there's no indication that they're in any way involved or knew of this, and obviously it just wouldn't make sense that they wanted their own cars to be destroyed and blown up. But, you know, I think that the core thing is that vehicles are an extremely powerful weapon, right? It's usually back and forth between what kills more kids per year, cars or guns, and they're just really effective. You know, 20 people every day are killed, pedestrians are killed by motor vehicles. So this really wasn't even really that much of a blip if you put it across the entire year, because, you know, obviously this was purposeful. This was an intentional act as opposed to people looking at their phone and then hitting a pedestrian in the sidewalk. But cars are really dangerous weapons, and they kill, you know, lots of people every year, 20 people a day on average. The number of pedestrians killed is at a 40-year high. So that's a real danger. And, you know, there's a reason that guns and vehicles are right up there as the number one killers of Americans.
I got to say, though, when you talk about the New Orleans attack and the Vegas explosion as well, the folks that rented their cars out to these individuals, the Tesla and the pickup truck, they didn't know their cars were going to be used in this nefarious way. What are the screening practices like to be able to use Turo?
You know, there's a little bit of a process. Obviously, it's, you know, just like a hotel versus an Airbnb. I think that's sort of a good comparison between going to say a car rental company or going through Turo. This is sort of a peer-to-peer sharing network. But these are the biggest expenses for a lot of people. A lot of people can't afford their basic needs because they have to get from one place to the other. So, you know, there's a reason that this is something that people are relying upon in renting out their cars, because those are often the biggest source of debt for Americans, is their vehicles and their cars, and that's what they have all of their money tied up in. So, you know, when there's a way to sort of earn some of that back when they're not using their vehicle, I think it presents a very huge opportunity to people who are struggling with those monthly car payments.
Law enforcement saying anything about anything that could change at Turo because of this and the way in which they use their rental practices?
Yeah, I mean, Turo is cooperating with the investigation, so there's nothing thus far that we've seen, but it's certainly something that I'm sure law enforcement will be asking more questions about.
Ryan Riley, thank you. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for this Everybody. Coverage picks up right now. All right, we are coming on the air with breaking news. The latest on the investigation into the Bourbon Street attack. The FBI says the attacker acted alone, but many questions remain. The Sugar Bowl underway right now, Bourbon Street back open. We're going to take you to both places in just a minute. We're also getting late details on the man who blew up the cybertruck in Vegas. The FBI saying he also acted alone, but they still don't know why he did it. We are live on the ground as well. Plus, the video just into us from the FBI of a suspect planting 2 pipe bombs the day before January 6th, the RNC and DNC headquarters on Capitol Hill. How they hope it will help solve that case. And the latest moves in the high-stakes PR battle playing out very publicly between Blake Lively and her co-star Justin Baldoni, the dueling lawsuits the stars are filing. Then in tonight's original, the Americans deciding to say goodbye to the U.S. What's behind their motivation to pull up roots? That's later on in the show. Hey, everybody, I'm Yasmin in for Hallie tonight. And right now, 2 active investigations into 2 New Year's Day attacks, with President Biden just saying tonight that the FBI tells him, as of now, they have no information that anyone else is involved in the deadly attack in New Orleans. That says there had been all those questions about whether there is any connection between that attack and the cybertruck explosion outside of Trump International Hotel. No indication that that's the case, but police in Vegas say there are some similarities. You're taking a live look at the Superdome in New Orleans, the Sugar Bowl happening there right now after it was postponed yesterday. Security there said to be similar to the level used for the Super Bowl. Our team inside the Superdome capturing this video during a moment of silence for the victims before kickoff. And this is a live look at Bourbon Street. Take a look at that, where the attack happened, back open, after crews cleaned up the gruesome scene there early this morning. The identities of some of those 14 victims who were killed slowly coming in now. You see their faces here. They include parents of young children, a student who had just finished his first semester at the University of Alabama, and a member of the New Orleans Saints and Pelicans video production teams. There are still several other victims who we're waiting to learn more about, and at least 35 others who were hurt in the attack. One of those survivors describing to our Tom Yamas the aftermath of the attack.
His name was Patrick. He came over, and he told me that there was a lot of people that didn't make it, and they were dead, and I was lucky to be alive. And I kept asking for someone to help me and get me out of there.
In Las Vegas, police painting a detailed picture of the moves of the cybertruck that exploded just outside Trump International Hotel the same day as the attack in New Orleans. 7 people got hurt in the explosion in Vegas, and the person inside the car died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his head. That person rented the cybertruck, according to the sheriff, Matthew Levolsberger, an active-duty special operations soldier. Morgan Chesky is following developments on the cybertruck explosion from Vegas. Jesse Kirsch is at the Sugar Bowl for us, and Gotti Schwartz is in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. Gotti, if you will, start us off, take us there. How are folks feeling? What is the scene just a little bit more than 24 hours after this horrific attack?
Yeah, let me show you, Yasmin. We're going to take a walk down here. A huge police presence, obviously, on Bourbon Street. But one of the things that a lot of people are noticing is that all of a sudden there are these barriers, these portable barriers. We saw them go in about midday today. They're on the sidewalk, so there is no access for cars that are coming from Canal Street or some of these streets that are a little bit further out. But this right here, this is Bourbon Street. I want to show you this. If we come down this way, you see, it's in full swing here. You've got Bourbon Street all the way down to those buildings. If we step out, you can see those buildings are basically where Canal Street is. That's where the truck was able to turn, go around a police cruiser that was parked there, and then start speeding down. Right over there where that light is, just down the way, that's where that truck really started picking up speed, accelerating through. Unfortunately, this area, this is part of the area that was where we saw the most fatalities. Some of the witnesses that we've been talking to described this eerie sensation. Ordinarily, with a large truck, you would expect a revving as it started to accelerate. Because this truck was an electric truck, it was silent as it was speeding through. So a lot of people didn't see it coming around here. A little bit further out, some people were able to jump out of the way. You're hearing the sounds of performing here. That's part of Bourbon Street. So many people here out. This is part of the healing process. It was so important to open up Bourbon Street to the people that live here and work here and celebrate here. But this is some of the ways that they're processing what happened. But over there, you've got some flowers marking one of the memorials for some of the people that were lost here. And then just down the way, I'm going to take you right to the spot where that truck came to a stop. It was speeding through here. Then there was this kind of a crane that was in the middle of the road, just happened to be in the right place because it stopped the terrorist that was driving through. He crashed into this large crane that was right in front of this hotel right here. And then as soon as he crashed, officers were running down Bourbon Street, sprinting after this truck. He stopped right here. The crash brought out so many people that were inside of these different establishments. And then as they came out and as the officers approached, the terrorists got out. And this right here, this is where that gun battle started. Those officers opening fire, killing the terrorist, ending his rampage right here. But then the officers pushed everybody back. They still had to clear this entire scene. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people in a lot of these clubs. So they knew something was going on. They tried to come out. The officers were holding them back. And they held in these clubs and in these bars for hours until they were finally able to leave. It was a very chaotic situation. But again, open here tonight, Bourbon Street, and a lot of people coming out to show their support.
Yeah, unbelievable to see the change of what it was just yesterday to what it is now. And just thinking about kind of the eeriness of where you're standing, right? You and I, Gotti, were talking yesterday evening. We were talking about a social media video that had been posted after that white pickup truck had crashed into that crane-like contraption. And there was someone, I believe, who was filming from the establishment just to the left of you who had then had to...
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's that video. Yeah, and that video, I know exactly which one you're talking about. So many people have seen it. It happened right here. So they were in an establishment, I think right over here. They come outside, and then they run far, far, far to the back and take shelter in some bathrooms because this is where it all went down. And then again, they weren't allowed to leave for a long time. And then all of a sudden, the officers thought maybe there are bombs inside of these establishments because they found 2 pipe bombs down the way at the second light and the third light that you see down there. Those pipe bombs had been planted there. So they start clearing out all of these clubs very quickly, pushing people out of the street, getting them out of the way, and then sweeping this entire area. So you can imagine just how much ground they had to cover in such a short amount of time. Fortunately, they didn't find any bombs in, but such a chaotic situation.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about our own Tom Winter in just a bit about those IEDs that were discovered there on Bourbon Street. For now, Gotti, thank you. Appreciate it. I want to bring in Jesse Kirsch, who's at the Sugar Bowl for us, to talk more about what's happening there. I mean, this thing delayed just about 24 hours or so. Now it is in full swing. Jesse, take us there. What is it like? What have been the security preparations like? How are they making people feel safe there tonight amidst this historic moment?
I got to tell you something, Yasmin. If you dropped someone inside the stadium at their seat, they didn't walk over here, they didn't take a car over here, they just were put in their seat and they were watching the game. At this point, you would not know what had happened in this city over the last 24 hours, for better or for worse. That was the atmosphere inside the stadium. They had a moment of silence for around 20 seconds before kickoff, but the better part of half an hour before kickoff. And I'd say at that point, the stadium was only about 60% full. You could really hear a pin drop just about at that point. So it was quite silent, quite respectful in terms of the demeanor of the crowd, but it wasn't even at a capacity situation at that point. So, you know, they moved on to the game pretty quickly from there. And when you're in the game, it feels pretty normal. But I can tell you, having been in there, walking around in the concourses, we did see an FBI SWAT team in camouflaged uniform standing around the concourse. I saw DHS police officers standing around the concourse. So there's definitely an elevated, visible security presence. I've been to plenty of sporting events, college, professional. I've never seen an FBI SWAT team standing around a concourse in camouflage before. So definitely, as you start to look around, you get a better sense of that. And out here where we are, they have expanded the hardened barricades. They have hardened, or I should say, more combat-looking and SWAT-looking police vehicles, long guns drawn or not drawn, but long guns, across the chest. So definitely heavily armed, very visible police presence out here. And what I can tell you is from conversations our team has had and what we've heard from a mix of fans we've talked to is the people we asked about who were on their way into the game. I asked them if they had any moment of hesitation, and pretty much everyone we talked to said no, they didn't think twice about wanting to come to the game. And one person described not feeling great about seeing all of this presence, but was going to be feeling good about going into the game. Other people comforted by seeing the security presence. So, no perfect answer to having all of this, but definitely authorities here trying to very clearly show the force capability they have. And after the security failures on Bourbon Street into New Year's Day, certainly very slim. I mean, certainly never a margin for error when we're talking about human life. But in light of what occurred there, the game they're hosting right now, and the fact the Super Bowl here is next month, a lot of eyes on this game, Yasmin.
Yeah, a city there trying to pick up the pieces after this incredible tragedy that we saw yesterday. Jesse Kirsch-Forrest, thank you. I want to turn back now to that Cybertruck explosion in Vegas. I want to go to Morgan Chesky, who's standing by for us at the Trump Hotel there. There was a press conference with Vegas police, Morgan, and the FBI were there. And we got a ton of information about the U.S. Army soldier at the center of this case. What are officials saying about how he got to this hotel and potentially how he died?
Yeah, Yasmin, we've learned so much in the past 24 hours. It really is quite telling to see the scope of this investigation and how quickly it's grown. You mentioned the information we learned from this press conference. I think the big headline coming out of it is the fact that authorities did identify who they believe was at the wheel of this Tesla Cybertruck, and they identified that individual as Matthew Livelsberger, a 37-year-old active member of the military. He was a master sergeant, a Green Beret. And as for how this individual went through a series of life events that brought him here, that remains very much under investigation, any sort of radicalization. But as far as the physical journey, Yasmin, because he rented that Tesla Cybertruck in Colorado, they were able to track his route very carefully. In fact, we have a map of it right here showing his journey from Colorado down south into New Mexico, then across Arizona, and then up into Las Vegas, Nevada, where authorities say they believe he was the one who drove the Cybertruck yesterday morning on New Year's Day in front of the Trump International Hotel, where it detonated just a few seconds later. And so that's been at least part of the investigation that's come into light. We do know that FBI has also conducted a search in Colorado Springs, Yasmin, that we believe may have been a residence of this man as well. Yasmin?
What about motive? What about objective here? How are they investigating this thing? Have we heard at all from authorities that they've connected with any kind of former known associates of the individual, possibly people that he served with when he was in the military?
Yeah, he had several overseas deployments, and I asked the sheriff today, when speaking to friends and family in this investigation so far, have you received any red flags? He said that this was all part of an ongoing investigation. As for what else they've gathered for a potential motive, I think that is part of what the FBI may have been hoping to gather from that home. I want you to hear, as far as potential motive or plan here, what the sheriff said in response during the press conference earlier. Take a listen.
The question is, am I comfortable calling it a suicide mission? I'm comfortable calling it a suicide with the bombing that occurred immediately thereafter. I'm not giving it any other labels.
Yeah, Yasmin, you can see investigators still keeping their cards close to the vest here, sharing everything that they know definitively, but not oversharing, at least right now. And I should note that they are still awaiting an official DNA match to the body recovered in that Cybertruck before announcing that it is indeed that 37-year-old. Yasmin.
All right, Morgan Chesky for us. Thank you. Appreciate it. I want to bring in Tom Winter now to talk more about kind of both of these things that are happening very much simultaneously. Are there connections? Are there not connections? And how our authorities are drilling down on this. But first, Tom, let's talk about the IEDs. I know you have some new reporting on that. We were just talking about that with Gotti as we were looking at him on Bourbon Street. Walk us through what we know.
Yeah, and I'm not being rude by looking down. I'm just, we do have a new seeking information poster from the FBI that's been posted in the last 2 minutes of this individual. I'm going to ask you guys to move in on my phone here. If you can see it, I know I got the privacy screen.
Let's get this steady in on Tom's phone.
And so this is something that's just been released by the FBI. This is one of the coolers that they have. You can see it there on the sidewalk. It's a little tough to see. It's the photo. It's not our camera. It's a little bit difficult to see because this is where apparently one of the IEDs, and I'm going to take it down now, where one of the IEDs was held. And it's taped inside that cooler. It is inside a galvanized pipe with end caps. That's important to the design of it. It's got nails coated in there and then an explosive and a remote receiver for somebody to be able to detonate it. And that's something that is was certainly concerning for law enforcement because it's really straight out of two particular issues that we saw from Al-Qaeda and later from ISIS, terrorist propaganda about how to make these devices. So that certainly got everybody's attention once they were able to get into there. The FBI putting out new information, and Yasmin tonight, asking people if they saw the whereabouts of this suspect Jabber, and they have several new surveillance photos of him as well. Nothing as far as our overall understanding and everything our colleagues in New Orleans have been reporting has changed, to be clear, but they want to get more information about this individual's whereabouts, and they want to get more information about when they saw him out and about.
Did they find the other end of that receiver on his person after they neutralized him?
So we had heard that there was a transmitter perhaps found in the truck, but we don't have a lot of clarity on whether or not, excuse me, that's something they were looking into, whether they were able to find it in the truck. I don't know if we ultimately have clarity here today if they actually found that.
So yesterday we had learned about some of his travels. We know oftentimes we look into travels, to social media action as well, what they were searching for. And we had seen that he had traveled at one point to Cairo, Egypt. He had also traveled to Canada, I believe, as well, right? When you're looking at these IEDs, and I know that you're incredibly familiar with them, having covered this type of thing for so long, is this a type of thing that you need to kind of learn to build in person, or something that you can learn online, that he could literally be searching online for to learn to build?
It's a super question. Unfortunately, this is stuff that people have been able to build in the past online. Now, there are some instances where there have been terror incidents in Europe where somebody was responsible for helping to devise the explosive, because that was a homemade explosive. That's a little bit different. But I've held the mock-ups of the bombs that were used in the Boston Marathon bombing in my hands, including galvanized pipe bomb, like the kind that we're talking about here. And it would be something I could teach somebody how to do based on the material online.
I know you have reporting to do on Nightly News, and I know you got to go. I have one last question for you. But right now, authorities are just investigating if there's any possible connection between Vegas and New Orleans. There's nothing definitive as of yet.
That's perfectly said. And, you know, there's an awful lot of coincidences between the two and the information they've been able to come up with. But it's still really early in this investigation. I mean, what they've been able to put together so far, as our understanding of timeline, is pretty incredible. So now the question is, what do they find when they actually get into the phones? They're not even in the phone yet of the Las Vegas person who drove underneath that portico, that valet at Trump Tower. They haven't even gotten the phone yet. So there's more information they need to do.
All right. If you want to see more with Tom Winter, you can catch him on Nightly in about 15 minutes or so over on NBC. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. All right. We've got some breaking news we're following as well. The FBI just moments ago releasing new video with an appeal for help from the public as it tries to solve one of the biggest mysteries around the January 6th attack on the Capitol. This is the video you're seeing here. A suspect placing one of the bombs near the Democratic National Committee headquarters in D.C. on January 5th, 2021. An explosive was also left at the RNC headquarters. They were real bombs, but they didn't go off. And it's not clear as to why. Something like 600 tips have come in, but so far nothing has led to a break in the case. The FBI still has no suspects and has not determined a motive. I want to bring in Ryan Riley to talk more about this. I was on the steps of the Capitol on January 6th. I remember the fallout from learning that there were these bombs that were found both near the RNC and DNC headquarters. And it's astounding to think that there is still no clarity as to who actually placed them there and what the motive and objective were. Walk us through this video now being released and where they are in this investigation.
Yeah, you know, given all of the news that we've seen elsewhere and all of these other FBI investigations, I think this actually comes at a really important time for informing Americans about just the basics of the FBI, because I think there's this Hollywood image of the FBI and then there's the reality of the FBI. And often that Hollywood image feeds a lot of the conspiracies that we see about what the FBI, because people really just overestimate, I think, their technological capabilities. Massive bureaucracies aren't known for being on the cutting edge of technology all the time. And I think that that's what you sort of got to recognize. With the January 6th case specifically, basically the failure here and what they haven't been able to determine is they haven't gotten a sharp enough image of the suspect's face, and he's very well covered. In fact, you know, some of the sleuths who have worked directly with the FBI and are in fact responsible for hundreds of the arrests that the FBI ultimately made have even went back and forth about whether or not this suspect was a male or a female. And they really, you know, they dove into this. They looked at the shoes. They're really good at following a lot of these leads. The FBI is also attempting to do that now as well. But, you know, I think this investigation, because of the span of the January 6th investigation, really kind of did not get necessarily all of the resources that it would have in a normal time.
I mean, at this point, what is the likelihood that they can solve this thing? And I say that because when you look at the images, and let's bring it up again, guys, if we can, the video of this individual placing these bombs, and then the other image as well of even the individual walking. It is almost impossible. I know they have obviously much more high-tech technology than we have in just watching it on our TV screens, but it's almost impossible to be able to identify these types of individuals. And if you're relying on the public to help out, the memory at this point for many people that may have seen this individual will likely not be very clear.
Yeah, I remember right after January 6th, they put out a request for Ring camera footage that was just outside of the retention request, right? So I think they got some footage, but there was definitely footage in the early days that was missed here. So, you know, I think there are a lot of, there is a report that came out even today from Congress, from Republicans in the House looking back at this, and they said that the FBI had identified several suspects that they looked into preliminarily. But I think you're spot on about that timing, because if you imagine, even if they were able to identify somebody now, getting that over past the, the question of beyond a reasonable doubt is going to be tough, even given how much time has passed. Yes.
I mean, and listen, obviously, also with everything that has just happened over the last 24 hours here in this country at the start of 2025, you have the inauguration just 18 days away at this point, January 6th, a couple of days away as well, the anniversary of January 6th. This individual very much likely still out there. Ryan Riley, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, let's turn now back to New Orleans, where we're learning some new details about the Bourbon Street attacker, including that he abandoned a plan to kill members of his own family in favor of the attack in New Orleans.
In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers.
I want to go to Kathy Park, who's in Houston for us, where the terrorist was actually from. So ever since his identity was confirmed, we have been kind of getting this drip of who he was, how he identified, including what we just heard from the FBI, indicating the terrorist had a pretty rocky home life in the years leading up to this attack. What more do we know here, Kathy?
So, Yasmin, according to public records obtained by NBC News, we know that Jabbar was married twice, divorced twice. Also in 2020, his second wife filed a restraining order, and this order barred both parties from, quote, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causing bodily injury to the other party or to a child of either party. These records also revealed that he was embroiled in financial troubles as well, and I want to tick through some of the debt that he was facing. More than $27,000 in past due house payments, $28,000 in business losses, and more than $40,000 in credit card and other debt. So there were many signs that Jabbar was dealing with some financial challenges, some personal issues as well. But we do want to point out that we are here in Texas because Jabbar has deep ties to the state. He grew up in Beaumont, eventually relocated to the Houston area, according to a video that he posted in 2020 to YouTube. He also touted his brief real estate experience as well. But I can tell you, Yasmin, the scene that we are at right now is far different from what we saw this time yesterday. So we are near the last known address linked to the suspect. And yesterday there was a huge law enforcement presence, like I said, at the local and federal levels. We know that the area was searched and cleared as of early this morning. The FBI did not say that they pulled out any evidence from one of these homes here, only to say that they had a presence in this community because this was all part of the ongoing investigation in New Orleans. But quickly before I go, I do want to point out that I spoke with a neighbor in this area. He said he knew the suspect, saw the white truck that he drove in New Orleans. Obviously, he's shocked by what has happened. He also said that he spoke with Jabbar on New Year's Eve. I asked him, what did you guys talk about? He said that he was moving to Louisiana to begin a new job in IT. Yasmin?
Wow. That is incredibly eerie to hear. Kathy Park, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so the most important people from yesterday are the victims. And in the deadly attack, there was a 25-year-old man. His name was Matthew Tenedorio. He grew up on Long Island and moved to New Orleans, where he worked at the Superdome. He was out with a group of friends on Bourbon Street when the attack happened. I want to bring in Matthew's uncle, Will Colgan, to talk more about Matthew. How you doing, Will?
We're hanging in there, I guess, is the only way to describe it. We're trying our best. The family is, as you can expect, devastated by, the loss of our nephew and son and brother, cousin. So we're just trying to get through these initial days of immense pain. And that's why we're doing, many family we're doing these interviews, because we want to just, make sure that everyone knows, how special and amazing Matthew was.
I got to say, I love the picture that we keep putting up here of Matthew holding what seems to be maybe a beer and a pretzel, possibly at an amusement park, corn dog, actually, I'm told. Who doesn't love a corn dog?
Exactly.
What was Matthew like?
He's just he was an amazing boy. That smile that you see there, he had that smile on his face all the time. He was just so happy and go lucky and, positive. He had a German Shepherd that he loved. That was his baby. He just was a normal kind of 25-year-old guy. He loved his family. He loved his friends. I was telling somebody earlier that it was actually amazing how much he would actually hang out with his family for, family get-togethers. That's some 25-year-olds, don't make that time. And he did. He knew that it was important to be with his family.
I know he was a New Yorker, a Long Island boy, true to my heart, obviously, being here in New York. But he moved to New Orleans because he wanted to work at his dream job at the Superdome of all places. What was that like for him?
He was ecstatic to get that position. And actually to work with his father. So, his father worked in a different department, but they, to work together, he was ecstatic. His mom always said, like, he was very meticulous about things. And especially when it came to his tools and getting to work on time, it was a dream come true for him. And he was enjoying every minute of it.
How did you guys learn that Matthew was a victim of yesterday's attack?
Well, we couldn't find him for for several hours in the morning, and he wasn't answering his phone. And finally my sister went into, the University Medical Center, and through some contacts and people we know in law enforcement, they hooked her up with somebody that said, or maybe it was her daughter-in-law, and said, they're having a conference in the conference room. So her and my brother-in-law went, and that's when they told him. I know some people were told earlier in the morning, but I guess it took a long time to process through certain the amount of people. So she found out at like 9:30 in the morning, I guess, something like that.
I've never been through something like what your family is experiencing, but I've experienced loss, and I know it's hard to see life go on after loss. What is it like to see the Sugar Bowl happening, to see Bourbon Street open back up just 24 hours after Matthew tragically lost his life there?
It's tough. It's tough to see that. Just for many reasons. The security of it. You don't want anyone else to get hurt. And then it's also tough to see people moving on with their life. But then there's the other side that you kind of don't want to let the terrorists win, and that's how they win, by making us afraid to go about our normal lives. And I think it's tough to say, but I think in a way we have to, in the memory of our lost loved ones and all these people, so many different people were lost, not just Matthew, and in their memory we have to make the best out of our life and move on, and not move on from them, but move on with our lives and live life.
Yeah. And we were seeing the pictures of some of the other victims that lost their lives yesterday alongside Matthew as you were speaking. Will, my heart goes out to you and your family and all that you are experiencing right now, and the courage it takes to speak up today with us and trust us with Matthew's story. Thank you, and I wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back, everybody. All right, tonight, major developments in the growing legal battle between Hollywood stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, with 2 new lawsuits filed on New Year's Eve. Baldoni now suing the New York Times for libel over its reporting on Lively's allegations against him. He says the article is, quote, rife with inaccuracies, misrepresentations, and omissions that relied on Lively's, quote, self-serving narrative. The Times says it'll vigorously defend against the suit. And what's more, Lively is also out with a new federal lawsuit against Baldoni and the production company involved in their movie, It Ends With Us. Baldoni's attorney did not immediately respond to a request for comment on this lawsuit. Remember, this is coming after her initial complaint alleging sexually inappropriate behavior on set and a coordinated effort to smear her. Baldoni's team has called these allegations, quote, completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious. Chloe Malas joining me now. I mean, all of this has been going on really for the last couple of weeks or so, and I think a lot of folks are a little confused as to the back and forth, right? The really kind of nuts and bolts of what each party is saying. Walk us through that.
Okay, so there were 2 lawsuits, both filed on New Year's Eve. And I think that's why people feel like they're getting so much information all at once, because originally Blake Lively had filed a civil rights complaint in the state of California, alleging harassment on set, that it was in a very toxic workplace for her. Well, now she's suing Justin Baldoni for all those accusations that she made over a week ago. But Justin Baldoni is now suing the New York Times for $250 million, accusing them of libel. As you know, the burden of proof is very high to go after a news organization for something like defamation. So what he is pointing to are text messages that he says were taken out of context purposefully, that text messages that had nuance and emojis, they weren't actually laid out the way that they should have been, and that even emojis were taken out. Now, Blake Lively's team has come out and said that nothing in Justin Baldoni's new lawsuit affects what they are planning to do. Now, I think the big question is, are we going to see them face off in a courtroom at some point? And it sounds like this is only heating up more, with Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, coming out saying that he's going to be filing more lawsuits and providing more text messages and proof.
So I know that Lively wasn't, as you just talked about as well, mentioned in the libel suit that Baldoni filed against the New York Times, but there has also kind of been a lot of fallout for Baldoni from all of this.
He's been dropped by William Morris Endeavor, his big Hollywood agency. The co-host of his podcast just quit. And he's also lost a recent award that was given to him by an organization that was actually championing him for his support of women. I mean, this movie was about women and domestic violence and giving people without a voice a voice. And now he's being accused of all sorts of harassment for allegedly showing Blake Lively pornography on set and talking, or his producer did, and that he was talking in an explicit way, and that they even had to have a meeting, according to Blake Lively's lawsuit, with Ryan Reynolds, her husband, Justin Baldoni, the production company, and herself to lay out points in order for her to return to the set. So again, you can imagine that through discovery and motions, and as this potentially gets to trial, which it will take a while, as you know, I mean, we cover these sorts of things all the time, it could get uglier.
So there's been a lot of stones thrown. What does this mean going forward? What is going to happen? What is that timeline?
Well, there's a lot of interest, but I think that what you're going to see is that potentially sometime in the next year, you might see this face off in a courtroom. But do Blake
think it'll end up there?
But do Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni really want that to happen? Maybe Justin Baldoni at this point. But does Blake Lively really want to? Will we see cameras in there like a Johnny Depp Amber Heard 2.0? I mean, that is where this likely might head. But also, it sounds like Baldoni's side has a lot more lawsuits, and you might see them now sue Blake Lively.
Well, we know what he's seeking, but what is she seeking?
Well, right now, I mean, she's seeking unspecified damages.
Okay.
And so the thing is now that she has finally, waved that flag and sued him, you can imagine he's going to countersue. And I think what's interesting is what sorts of text messages, what is he going to show and produce? Because he says that things were taken out of context by the Times and emojis were removed and nuance and context, that if the American public had the trove of text messages, that they would have a much different opinion. So again, I think this is only going to get more complicated, messier. And are these two really going to go down this path? Because it's going to put them both in a more vulnerable light.
Especially when you have these huge Hollywood superstars.
And families and all.
Yeah. Speaking of families, we have a studio audience in play right now. We got your two little boys, right?
Yes.
Leo and Luke. Alex and Aviva, they're best friends as well, and your whole family behind them as well. Your friends, your husband. I mean, you can't get better than that, right? Watching Mommy on TV. Can you guys say hi?
They love NBC. They love watching Mommy, and they're on holiday break right now.
That's awesome.
They love Hallie Jackson.
And they're coming to look at the tree, right, outside 30 Rock?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
They also want to see SNL. I said maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, now is the time.
Yeah.
Because they're not in session.
Tickets, but I'll take you to set.
Yeah. Well, thank you for staying on this for us. Appreciate it, Chloe.
Thank you.
All right, let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, at least 10 people are now hurt after a shooting outside a nightclub in Queens, New York overnight. Authorities believe there were 3 to 4 gunmen and are investigating whether the shooting is gang-related. All the victims are expected to be okay. Police saying they haven't made any arrests so far. Number 2, electricity now restored across almost all of Puerto Rico after a sweeping blackout there. Around 1.4 million people were left without power going into the new year. The private power company there saying customers could still see temporary outages over the next few days. Number 3, Apple now putting warnings on its AirTags to prevent children from consuming the batteries in them. It comes after consumer product safety officials accused the company of violating a safety requirement. We don't know how many children have been harmed by these AirTags. Apple's also adding warnings on the Find My app when changing out the batteries for them as well. Number 4, the FDA is now recalling bags of broccoli from at least 20 states because of listeria contamination. The brand is sold by Walmart stores across the country. The FDA reporting no one has gotten sick yet. The company, though, Barga Fresh, says consumers should throw out the veggies. It's coming just weeks after another recall for broccoli products with possible E. coli contamination. And number 5, the first meteor shower of the year should light up the sky over the next couple of nights, with the peak coming later tonight. Experts say this might be one of the strongest ones of the year. The shower caused by debris from a nearby asteroid, and it could last up to 6 hours. All right, when we come back, new comments from South Korea's impeached president tonight over the move to arrest him. What's happening outside his official residence? Plus, health officials say the patient with Canada's first human case of bird flu is out of the ICU. That update coming up next. All right, turning back now to our coverage of the deadly attack New Year's Day in New Orleans. In just the last few minutes or so, President Biden saying he's going to try to visit the city. He didn't elaborate on when that could be. That's after he met with members of Homeland Security to talk about what is and is not known to investigators about that attack and the cybertruck explosion in Vegas. Here's what he said about the situation in New Orleans.
New Orleans is a city of tremendous spirit. You can't keep it down. You really can't. People in New Orleans are sending an unmistakable message. They will not let this attack or the attackers' deluded ideology overcome us.
Gabe Gutierrez following all this for us from West Palm Beach, Florida. Gabe, walk us through it, right? Because historically, this is what presidents do. When terror attacks like this happen, they visit the cities in which they happen. They also visit the victims and the families of the victims that were most affected by an attack like this one. What do we know about the possibility the president may, in fact, be making a visit to New Orleans?
Hi there, Yasmin. Well, the president just saying that just within the past few moments as he wrapped up that ceremony at the White House for the Presidential Citizens Medal. That was an unrelated ceremony. Then oftentimes at those types of events, you have reporters as he's walking out trying to shout questions at him. Apparently, he did respond very briefly to one reporter who asked him whether he was going to try to make it down to New Orleans, and he said yes, that he's going to try. Now, there's obviously a lot of concern in the immediate aftermath of any natural disaster or national tragedy or mass casualty event that the president and the White House don't want to go there too soon because it could take away from local resources at the site. So President Biden saying that he's going to try. Of course, he has less than 3 weeks before he leaves office. Right now, we do not know exactly when that might happen. Presumably, though, it would have to be in the next few days.
I'm going to ask you to put your president-elect hat on for a moment as well, because I know you have some new reporting on President-elect Donald Trump and his stance on H-1B visas, which he became quite vocal about due to some things that were said by Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's right. And look, this is a controversy that kind of bubbled up over the last week or so, and it pitted two factions of President-elect Trump's supporters. You have on the one side the tech industry, so-called tech bros, and then on the other side you have the populist MAGA supporters, such as Steve Bannon. Well, this issue on H-1B visas, those are visas that allow highly skilled workers to come to the U.S. and work for up to 6 years. Well, over the weekend, President-elect Trump sided with Elon Musk, saying that he supports that visa program, even though back in 2016, he had released a written statement saying that he was basically against it, that it was rampant with abuse, and then he did not support it. Well, now we're hearing, from a source with the transition saying, downplaying any recent change in the opinion of the president-elect. This source says that he has supported this particular program before and that this really isn't a new stance. Still, some opponents of the program, there is backlash of the president-elect siding with Elon Musk on this particular issue. Certainly a controversy that is expected to continue, Yasmin.
I'm sure it will. Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. Appreciate it. So NBC covers hundreds of international stories every day. And because it's tough to read, watch, or listen to all of them, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment that we call The Global. In Montenegro, the government declaring 3 days of national mourning after a shooting left at least 12 people dead after a bar brawl less than 24 hours ago. 4 people were hurt. We don't know how they're doing. Law enforcement says the shooter fled the scene, eventually taking his own life while surrounded by police. Over to South Korea, investigators now heading to Seoul with plans to arrest the president there. You can see authorities driving towards his home. Apparently, hundreds of his supporters trying to block off the area. President Yoon attempted to impose martial law just last month, resulting in his impeachment, his looming arrest after he avoided several requests to appear in court for questioning. In Canada, health officials saying a teenager sick with the bird flu is now off oxygen and no longer infectious. The patient, a 13-year-old girl with a history of asthma, was the first case of bird flu in Canada. All right, coming up, the series of attacks on subways across New York City. What officials say they're doing to make the trains safer. All right, welcome back. There is growing alarm tonight after a string of gruesome, high-profile attacks in the New York City subway in recent weeks, including 2 men stabbed less than 20 minutes apart in unrelated attacks at Manhattan subway station yesterday. And a warning about this next video because it is disturbing. It shows a man on the afternoon on New Year's Eve getting violently pushed in front of an oncoming subway. He is expected to survive. My gosh. That is terrifying to see. And remember, there was that horrific incident where a sleeping rider was set on fire just 10 days ago as well. All of these, despite government promises of crackdowns and more National Guard and police deployed to subway stations. I want to bring in Sam Brock to talk more about this. All of this happening in the span of really 3 weeks over the holiday season. I mean, that video is terrifying. All of us have stood in that very position, looking at our cell phone, waiting for the subway to come. That could happen to anybody, right? What are they saying about these incidents and how they're going to step up security?
What you just showed, those examples are chilling and demonic, frankly. And I think that when you talk to people from the city, when you talk to the state governor's office, the MTA, they will say, this has been a rough last couple of weeks. But that, Yasmin, is not necessarily representative of what's going on big picture. They'll say, go back to March when we had this big 5-point plan. That's when Governor Hochul unveiled that. 1,000+ New York State police, National Guardsmen, MTA police on the ground. Thousands of cameras added. There is a proposal to get a law passed where judges would ban people who have committed assault or been convicted of assault from accessing the transit system. They say since that point in time, crime has dropped about 10% system-wide, and since January of 2021, it's dropped 42%. That's one side of the equation. The other one is talk to riders about what they're seeing right now. And they'll tell you that this is the most harrowing sequence of events that they have ever experienced. You mentioned it a second ago. A woman was literally lit on fire on a train in Brooklyn only a few weeks ago. Yesterday, there were 2 stabbings. One person was just literally standing on a platform and ended up getting stabbed by a sharp object. People are seeing the accumulation of this, and they are getting concerned. I did try to get a snapshot of people, regular riders, to find out how are you processing all this? What's your mentality about taking the subway? Here's a sample of what we heard.
I feel safe. It's just a way of life. You know, if you're down the city all the time, you know, you expect these things. It's gotten worse every year, and just the latest things that have been happening. If I didn't need to take the subway, I wouldn't.
So many times I've been threatened with my child on the subway, literally with a knife. So it's literally every day it's a lottery for me and my child.
She described it as a lottery, didn't know what was going to happen from one day to the next. The last point I would leave you with on this is that the city of Los Angeles has a population of 4.5 million people. The MTA chair said, imagine that's how many people ride our subways every single day. Would they take 5 to 6 crimes a day, the city of Los Angeles as a whole? Yes. We don't want to see any sort of violent crimes going on our subways, but that's sort of the comparison there.
But here's the thing. It's a necessity in the city. I take the subway 2, 3, 4 times every single day. I noticed actually a few months ago at my subway stop that there were barricades put in place along the subway platform. So we could actually stand behind those barricades, right? And then I noticed that where I switched, there were no barricades. So what is the plan to institute more of those kind of barricades so folks feel safer, that they won't necessarily get pushed onto the tracks?
There could be access issues on that when you consider about people who have disabilities or just like the sheer volume of people trying to get on and off of trains. But I will say this, there are definitely more police now, at least they say, officials, local, state, than there were previously, more cameras. And then there are calls now to improve the mental health services available in the city, because no one will sort of address this directly, but they will sort of hint around the fact that you have a confluence of homelessness, mental illness, and new laws that were passed only several years ago that make it easier to be out on the streets, even if you've committed a crime. And perhaps all of these are coming into one crescendo, leading to the situation that we have right now.
Did anybody you talked to say they're going to stop taking the subway?
No, no one said they would not.
Yeah, because you have to. You have to keep using
like
it.
you said.
Yeah, Sam Brock, thank you.
Thanks, Yasmin.
Appreciate it. I'll be right back. To tonight's original now, with an in-depth look on a topic we've been keeping an eye on as the country continues to mourn the lives lost in just the first few days of the year. Some Americans are seeking a different life abroad. Gun violence, health care, and divisive politics are some of the largest motivators. NBC's Maya Eaglin spent the day with one American packing up to leave the country before President-elect Trump's inauguration.
When it comes to the American dream, I feel that I lived it. And it's literally the reason that I left. We were in our 3-story townhome. We had the trucks. I was in my big girl corporate 6-figure job. We had the things. And it wasn't a dream. It was more of like a fuzz, really.
32-year-old Bianca Lynch is a full-time digital nomad from North Carolina. While she's always wanted travel to be a part of her life, after the results of the 2024 election, she says she's making it permanent.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. They're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world.
It's very, very hard for us to see ourselves coming back and being in this country, having to be around that many people who felt that is someone who needs to be in power.
We've been following this trend of young people who don't see a future in this country. Before the election, you might remember our reporting about Gen Z Americans who felt like the American dream was out of reach.
I think the past 5 months where I hit 500 job applications, I got so depressed because I blamed myself.
And they said they were so exhausted by politics, they didn't even vote.
It's hard to change, but it's sometimes harder to stay where you're at.
Now, after the election, they're not alone in looking to leave the country. Google searches for digital nomad visas, how to move to Canada, and best countries to move to all peaked the day after the election and have since come back down, but still a striking shift.
I would say that right now, since the election, the biggest trend is people looking for a plan B.
In 2022, Jen Barnett founded Expatsy to help fellow Americans travel and move abroad. She left America after the 2016 election.
Our site really first took off when Roe versus Wade was overturned.
Jen says her site saw 10 months worth of traffic in the 2 weeks after the election, and the top reasons people say they want to leave has changed. With 72% of visitors to their website citing the U.S. being too conservative as the reason they want to move, which she says is a 30% increase from before the election.
You know, some people who maybe don't agree with the president-elect saying, now is not the time to give up. It's a time to invest. It's a time to stay here. It's time to focus on our community. With you leaving, someone with that mindset might be like, are you giving up?
Oh, that's fair. I mean, I would honestly just ask the question, is it worth it to you to fight the fight? Do you have that fight in you? Because honestly, I don't have it. Instead of trying to change an entire country, when I can simply remove myself and go somewhere else and by default be happier, I'm choosing peace.
Do you think there's any circumstances where you could see yourself coming back to the U.S.? Let's say in 4 years, there's another president that you do agree with.
The election was not the only reason that we decided to leave the country. Even under people who are not Trump, American culture is still American culture. It's still the rat race. It's very hard to imagine coming back after experiencing something way better.
Maya Eaglin, NBC News.
That's a wrap for this, everybody. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.